Hi, teachers, and welcome to the Alive Sensory Drive e-learning module 2. Today, we are going to talk about effective sensory processing strategies for the classroom. The Alive Sensory Drive is a framework to improve teachers' self-efficacy with sensory self-regulation interventions in the classroom. The A is for awareness, L is for learning, I is for impact, V is for value, and E is for education. There are 3 objectives to this e-learning module. 1 is to define and identify sensory processing. 2, identify the signs of sensory processing disorder in the classroom. And 3, how to address sensory processing disorder in the classroom using sensory processing activities. This will help to improve interventions for these skills in the classroom daily. Now let's define and identify sensory processing. Normal sensory processing outcomes. The goal is a self-regulated, modulated response. Sensory processing is the ability to take in information from one's body and the environment, organize this information, and respond normally to the demands in the environment. According to Kranowitz and Schultz, self-regulation and modulation is defined as a child's ability of the nervous system to have a middle ground or comfort zone of regulation as the student interacts with the environment. Students will be able to attend to tasks, stay calm, transition from one activity to another, follow directions, process academic information, screen out distractions, complete activities, and socially interact with peers. Sensory processing disorder is defined as the ineffective processing of sensory information. This happens when sensory neurons do not send effective messages into the central nervous system and/or motor neurons do not send effective messages out to the body for the adaptive response to the environment. Kuipers, who authored The Zones of Regulation, outlined 4 components of self-regulation. These include sensory processing, emotional regulation, cognitive regulation, and social perspective taking. According to Watling, Koenig, Davies, and Scaff, sensory-based interventions typically occur in the child's natural environment and consist of applying adult-directed sensory modalities to the child with the aim of producing a short-term effect on self-regulation, attention, or behavioral organization. These skills help to support sensory processing interventions in the classroom daily. Now for the second objective of this e-learning module. This is to identify the signs of sensory processing disorder in your classroom. These consist of tactile dysfunction, dyspraxia, gravitational insecurity, proprioceptive dysfunction, visual dysfunction, and auditory dysfunction. The ineffective processing of sensory information is known as hyposensitivity or hypersensitivity. The goal is to provide a sensory plan that promotes a self-regulated student for classroom performance. Students that are hyper-responsive usually interpret information in their brains at a very fast pace. These students will normally run out of the classroom, have short attention spans, scream, throw things, or are always moving. A hypo-responsive student is normally withdrawn, quiet, don't socialize much, don't initiate movements a lot, and can't attend to tasks for a very long period of time. Dyspraxia is another area of sensory processing disorder. It is described as when students have trouble learning the steps in a new skill and difficulty performing the skill smoothly and automatically. These students normally have difficulty conceptualizing and organizing information in the brain, unable to generalize a new skill, poor self-help skills, difficulty with learning to write, difficulty with reconstructing shapes and puzzles, difficulty with sequencing skills for learning, poor body awareness, difficulty planning and executing movement, and praxis allows for ideation, planning, execution, and termination of an activity. The best response as a teacher is to slow the activity down, break it down into small steps, be sure to celebrate with the child for accomplishing a small goal, and adding spatial relations concepts to different activities so that they know where to start and where to end an activity. Characteristics of tactile dysfunction, as some kids can be very sensitive to touch. However, touch provides a lot of input to the sensory receptors in the skin as well as the receptors located in the muscles. These help to produce a calming effect. If a child is hyper-responsive, their response is negative to light touch. They're irritable when others are close. They show fight or flight symptoms. They crave deep touch or a hug. They resist having their teeth brushed. They are normally picky eaters and they mouth objects. They avoid tactile exploration of learning activities and sometimes will be toe walkers. If a child is hypo-responsive to tactile input, they do not notice touch well. They are unaware of messiness on their face. They don't notice disarray of their clothes if they're turned inappropriately. They have to be engaged in tactile exploration slowly, and sometimes they can have poor fine motor skills. Characteristics of gravitational insecurity and vestibular dysfunction include students who are hyper-responsive will have a need to keep moving, difficulty with sitting for longer periods of time. They will jump, rock continuously with their body, shake their head, bounce on furniture, turn around in a swivel chair, hit their head, or they may like the upside down position. Students who are hypo-responsive may not notice or object to being moved around, lack inner drive to move actively, not notice a falling sensation, have intolerance for movement, and dislike swinging, spinning, and sliding. Characteristics of proprioceptive dysfunction include students who are hyper-responsive will intentionally bump or crash into objects, stomp their feet, bang objects, head banging. Tight clothing will bother them. Jumping and hopping is something that they will seek, and they will avoid steps. Students who are hypo-responsive will prefer not to move, become upset when limbs are passively moved or stretched, avoid weight bearing, such as jumping, hopping, or rolling, have low muscle tone, and are usually picky eaters. Characteristics of visual dysfunction include students that are hyper-responsive will seek bright lights, seek visual stimulation, such as flickering the lights on and off, have difficulty visually tracking, difficulty focusing on objects, and are drawn towards ceiling fans. Students who are hypo-responsive will avoid direct eye contact, be unaware of light-dark contrast, respond late to visual information, avoid bright lights, lack visual attention skills, and will often line up their toys. Characteristics of auditory dysfunction include hyper-responsive students will often be distressed by loud noises, be distressed by sudden noises, be distressed by high-pitched sounds, be stressed by sounds that do not bother other people, are often afraid of thunder, fire alarms, sirens, or balloon poppings. Voices may seem louder to them as well. Students who are hypo-responsive seem unaware of the location of sounds, difficulty recalling or repeating words, difficulty maintaining attention to a voice or conversation, or even a story. They also have a poor sense of timing or rhythm. Now that we can identify if a student is hyper-responsive like a rabbit or hypo-responsive like a turtle, it's time for a sensory plan. Located at www.stickkids.com, the author uses a picture sensory program. There is a critter meter that is included in the plan that relates the rabbit to being the hyper-responsive student and a turtle that represents the hypo-responsive student. And in the middle, there is a stick figure that represents a self-regulated student. This is a very good picture sensory individualized program that can be used with sensory suggestions to meet individual students' needs for the classroom. Now for the third objective of this e-learning module, let's look at how to address sensory processing disorders in the classroom using sensory processing activities. A sensory activities list or a sensory diet is provided by the OT at school to improve sensory processing skills. These activities promote self-regulation and should be provided to the student on a regular basis to promote best functioning. Sensory processing activities that promote self-regulation can be broken down into different areas that provide input to the body to change the sensory outcome. These areas include motion, pressure and touch, heavy work, suck, chew, and breathe, routines and planning, and retreat. For motion activities, you can combine vestibular and heavy work. This will help to build motor planning, promote muscle work and motor skills, improve focus, posture, and fidgeting in the classroom. Activities should be completed slowly, which would make them more calming and relaxing. Activities completed very fast are more alerting, which increases attention and improves postural response. Some example of motion activities include sitting on a therapy ball, trampoline, rocking chair, rolling over a ball, having a movement break, fidget toys, using an air cushion, sitting on a ball at a desk, or even using a therapy swing. To assist students who have tactile dysfunction, as well as who remain in the fight or flight state from the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, the goal of the activity should be to promote a calming response. You can use weight, deep pressure, self-squeezes, massage, help to focus, energize, and calm, as well as tactile exploration activities for the hand. You can also include massage, as in student massaging their own hands, deep pressure through the shoulders, such as joint compression, pillows, bean bags, wall and chair push-ups, weighted vests, blankets, lap pillows or wraps, use of stress balls, or squeezing Play-Doh. Heavy work activities provides input to the muscle belly that is received in the brain as calming input. These activities helps to improve muscle tone and postural core strength, promote calmness and alertness, help to regroup the whole body, organizes the body, and helps with transitions during activities. You can place the student with the stomach over the therapy ball and they can roll back and forth. You can do other activities on the therapy ball, as well as you can play a video with a workout routine. Students can do a wheelbarrow walk with one another, a bear crawl walk, an army commando crawl, pushing a loaded cart, carrying objects across a room, or having students to crawl through a tube. Suck, chew, and breathe activities is a category from stickkids.com. Basically, when a student has to breathe in slowly, it is calming to the body. Straw sucking is like deep breathing with more resistance. Crunchy is alerting and chewy is organizing. Deep breathing exercises helps to slow the body's rhythms as well as the thinking process. You can have a student to sip through a straw, chew mouth chewies, crunchy snacks, fruit roll-ups, gummy bears or worms, Twizzlers, chew gum, or straw blowing games such as pushing cotton balls across the table by blowing air through a straw. Themes and planning activities is another category from stickkids.com. It teaches expectations, pre-warn when it's 5 minutes until the next transition, teach the child to understand and recognize emotions, provide movement breaks, cognitive support, strategies, and familiarity. Teachers may want to use picture schedules, visual timers, emotion cards, as well as teach them to use muscle energy to help burn some of the anxious feelings that the student may have. Retreat activities is another category from stickkids.com. It is used when needed to prevent sensory overload. It provides a comforting structure as well as a safe space for kids. You can use a tent, a beanbag music listening station, a quiet place to read a book. You can incorporate the use of shades and a hat in your classroom. You can have a quiet seating area as well as a relaxing chair. Teachers should also consider the use of an in-class sensory curriculum in collaboration with your occupational therapist. Two well-known and evidence-based research curriculums include the Zones of Regulation and How Does Your Engine Run? Consider incorporating sensory processing activities during your daily classroom schedule, such as maybe the zones of regulation, having the students to check their zones in the morning, then maybe adding a movement video during the day, maybe a golden noodle video break, some meditation time. They have student meditation videos as well as yoga videos, and allowing students to have 2-minute head down decompression breaks for them to reorganize their body. Lastly, I would like to take a look at the Alive model of sensory processing. This is basically a classroom support guide for sensory processing skills interventions daily. Some things to consider are: which sensory support tools are you using in your classroom? Consider if the brain should be stimulated up or if the brain should be calmed down. Always have tools and equipment available in the classroom that students can use. Calming techniques that can be incorporated in your day include breathing, meditation, yoga, and use of metronome music and rhythm beats. Also consider adding thinking strategies. Be sure to remind them of the zones of regulation so that they can recall whether a problem is a big or little problem, if they are using rock or flex brain, or listening to the inner coach or the inner critic. Also, teachers, you should use a classroom environment scanning method. Check for your visual lighting in the classroom. Check for sound, touch. Be sure that students are keeping their hands to self when needed. Motion and movement activities should be seated or structured. You can add the smell of lavender or chamomile, but caution for allergies of students in the room. And students should also understand how to check their behavior and watch their student interactions. It is always a good idea to identify the antecedents that may cause a student to go into the red zone of behavior. The last thing is to incorporate cognitive structure for building of executive functioning skills. Teach the student to be aware if they have self-starter skills. Students should follow routines and have expectations that they should meet for you daily, and use a picture schedule to help support them during the day. Self-discipline is also a key. This helps to teach kids self-management as well as to develop work habits in the classroom. This includes reinforcing that they are listening, seated, working, and watching you. The last thing is self-accountability is also important. Students need support in order to check themselves to make sure that they are doing the things that support learning in the classroom. You can provide a checklist for completion of activities and visuals for whether or not they're making good green choices or red choices. Thank you for attending this Alive Sensory Drive e-learning Module 2. It is our hope that you have learned some wonderful sensory processing interventions that will support your classroom daily. Thank you.